This is episode number 60.
Well, first of all, let me say that being able to go from SARS-CoV-2 outbreak to market authorization of SARS-CoV-2 specific oral antiviral drugs in merely 2 years, it's an incredible feat.
Part one of the Year in Review recording. The Year in Review recording was a 7.5 hours conversation marathon with speakers from previous episodes and business partners of the host and co-hosts. It was a whole lot of fun sitting down with amazing speakers from China, Europe, and North America and talking about what was hot in 2021 and how will 2022 evolve and develop. What are the expectations of our speakers for the coming year? As a start into 2022, I will bring the recording live in 7 separate episodes, each one a unique piece of information and about 1 hour long. Here is the first conversation with Astrid Woollard and Matthias Tarasiewicz as co-hosts, Irénée Robin and Dusica Lukac. We were talking about COVID-19, cryptocurrencies, cybersecurity, and merger and acquisition. I hope you enjoy the conversation the same way as I did. Enjoy the show. This was 2021, a year in review is the title of today's episode, and it will be probably the longest recording since I started the podcast 2 years ago. And I'm very happy to have today as co-host Astrid Woollard from close by Vienna. Hello, Astrid.
Hello.
And Matthias, I just realized that I never asked you how your family name is pronounced correctly. Matthias, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Welcome. Tarasiewicz is the Austrian way of pronouncing this. The
and
Polish equivalent would be Tarasiewicz, but I'm okay with the Austrian pronunciation. Thanks for asking.
Super. Great to have you on the show, Astrid and Matthias. Today we have an amazing lineup of guests from deep tech, from life science, from the pharma industry, from private organizations, and also Astrid is bringing some speakers from the digital space as well as Matthias is doing. And let's kick it off with the first speaker. Astrid, I would like to know from you how your 2021 was.
Oh, it was pretty exciting, I need to say. So it started off early this year, actually, already, that we co-founded as a team of 6 SMAPE Capital. So it was originally an investment collective from the 6 of us to invest in pre-seed and seed stage, early stage opportunities in Web3s in the blockchain space and particularly in tokenized economies. And we've gathered a lot of interest over the last few months, so that we decided actually to now sort of transform this into a fully fledged German-based fund. And so we're pretty busy on that front. We had to sort of get the lineup going for the deal flow, so really activate all our social network. We also have an in-house crawler solution that helps us also to sort of source very early stage deals by sort of getting different sources from the internet. So we've been pretty busy at looking at least at like 80 to 100 projects a month. We put a lot of pressure on research and
80,
also
just for my understanding, 80 to 100 per month.
Per month, yeah.
These are 1,200 per year. How do you manage that? How do you manage that?
Well, gladly, I'm not on my own. I've got a really great senior analyst with me working in a research team. So also I'm heading up research for SMAPE Capital. And basically, what we need to do is when we have our list, I mean, we go through it daily. We have quite a structure on how we record it also on like Excel spreadsheet, and also have a Trello board where you can easily say like, okay, this is not green, this is red, this is, well, let's wait and see, get in touch with them and sort of record our interactions with them. We briefly look at sort of the social media channels. Is there already a white paper out there? is there at least a website that we can have a look at? And if these few pieces of information already look interesting, then we normally reach out to the companies, unless they have been introduced for social capital, then that's something else. But if it's for the crawl, then we will reach out proactively, set up a call, and then take it from there.
What assets are you looking at in detail? I'm curious.
Well, it's exclusively digital assets, so tokens. So people always say like, oh, those Bitcoins, but there is much more than just Bitcoin. I mean, if you just look at websites that record those, like CoinGecko, CoinMarketCap, you will discover that there are already more than 10,000 of these assets just listed on these platforms. But this means it's not everything that there is. It's just the ones that they have actually sort of curated into their list. But there are many, many more. And we're quite, where we are very special is that we are very strict on the token's utility in these kind of networks. So we said like, well, in order to be really able to derive some value from such a token, from such a digital asset, it really needs to have a core functionality, really sort of a deep utility in those networks. Otherwise, it's just a purely speculative asset. And it's basically prone to just being to swings from up and down through what influencers are telling you, or maybe other snippets of information that you have in there. So we're quite strict on looking into that. But there are several sectors that we look at. I mean, DeFi is sort of a little bit on the side that we're looking at, because we think, okay, that hype has already been there. Now we have a lot of players already on the field. So it's really difficult to distinguish the few that could really sort of make the race or really challenge the platforms that are out there already. The next thing was NFTs, and we have invested in one game that's really, really exciting. And there are certainly other applications apart from gaming and sort of this arts and collectors universe that we see with NFTs. I'm sure we will be speaking more about this today as well.
Absolutely.
But what we're already seeing is that it's already a strong signal on the decentralized autonomous organizations or DAO side, that there's also a lot of DAOs being built now, investment DAOs, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Astrid, one question. DAO, I hear that quite frequently. What is that? What is DAO? I mean, is it a DAO I know from China, so it's...
That's a little bit a different one with a T, I think. But no, I said it's a decentralized autonomous organization. So it's basically also an infrastructure that's being built that should be self-governed or self-governed by the community. So there are different voting mechanisms also on how you can, for example, investment DAO make collectively investment decisions. So if decided, okay, we want to invest in, asset X now, or want to go out of it again. So it's a quite interesting use case for maybe the evolution also of funds, essentially.
Wasn't that the story with the US Constitution? Wasn't there something recently? Yes. And this was a DAO structure.
Yeah, I mean, there's also linked to an NFT, and there are many legal issues that we can see around this space as well, right? But there are also, again, there's so many DAOs coming up now. We see also like maybe, a third of our deal flow is now suddenly going into that space. But the problem is when you ask them a little bit, okay, how should the governance function of this DAO, which is an essential part of a DAO, if it's completely self-governed by the community, then sometimes you get quite wacky answers. And this is where we know, okay, this is probably not one that we would invest in. We have invested this year into Prime DAO, which is a really interesting DAO that also wants to bring sort of DeFi protocol rating to a next level. So it's also sort of crowdsourcing the ratings from the community, but in a way that is also being checked by stewards in this space, and a really high quality ratings there, and really intrigued to see what is coming out of that. And they will also have a mechanism of how DAOs can actually interact with other DAOs, because it's nice, if you have these kind of, autonomous organizations working in their own space, but it really becomes valuable once they can actually really interact with each other. And they have already sort of put together a framework now and sort of exchanging also assets with other DAOs to sort of make this a really strong structure.
I just wonder, DAO, I mean, when I think about fundraising for startups, for early stage startups, it's always very complicated to align the interests on one hand, but on the other hand, to find a cost-efficient structure to bring small investors, business angels, for example. I mean, the typical business angel, I think, in Austria is still investing something between 10,000 to 250,000 euros per person. Would DAO be a solution for that, to make it more easy, more accessible for more people?
Potentially, yes. But I mean, I think there are also good structures out there now, if you look at it. I mean, there's also on the cryptocurrency side, a lot of exchanges out there that would allow you already to go directly into an investment on your own. If you have your own the capabilities to research these things and assess these assets. But I think there's also something nice about it being collectively, pooling your capital into maybe a more diverse range of assets, like a fund structure, essentially, but maybe on a smaller scale. And that allows you to have exposure to a number of more assets that maybe just 2 or 3. Yeah.
That's great news. What is your outlook for 2022, Astrid? What will happen in the digital space? What does your crystal ball say?
My crystal ball will say that due to everything that we've seen last year, this year, also again, COVID pandemic. I don't like to take this word anymore, give up, but it's still sort of ruling us a little bit. Is that we will see still an increased push to digitalization, as we have seen now. I think that all these kind of developments that we've seen around NFTs and non-fungible tokens and the metaverse will pick up, that we will see also more interactions in the digital space, also around, digital health, telehealth. There will be more on those. We also see that actually in our own deal flow now with healthcare, there are more and more opportunities actually going that way. So yeah, for a digital space, I think it remains very positive.
Let me ask you one question in the opening. I mean, I remember all the price predictions that I got since last year. I wrote a timestamp on Twitter where I took it from an influencer. It's Bitcoin will be at $300,000 per coin at the end of 2021. Yeah. I think Michael Saylor came up with 1 million. Bitcoin price somewhere in the near future, potentially 2022 or 2023. And Raoul Paul excused himself for being wrong with his prediction that Ether will go to 20 to 30,000 euros or dollars per Ether. What is your price prediction for 2022?
Well, it could go up, it could go down, the crystal ball saying. I need to say, I honestly, I watch Bitcoin and Ether because it's obviously, in this space, but as an investable asset, I think it's less attractive because even if you look at other assets that are already, in the top 1,000 or so, they're very promising projects that could give you much better returns on your investment. So I personally am not I also don't hold any Bitcoin, I need to say, say that very openly. And I'm more interested really in infrastructures that have a sort of good utility.
Just a disclaimer, we don't give any financial advice here. So always do your own research. But it's great to hear your opinion as an expert in the field. Astrid, I see that our first speaker, Mrs. D, I just still struggling with her name, sorry for saying so, is already here. Would you like to take over? And I will promote Mrs. D to a panelist and should give her access to microphone and video. And here she is.
Perfect. Hello, Dusica. Well, you're welcome.
Hi. Hi, Astrid. Hi, Christian. I can see also Matthias is here. So nice, guys, to see you. I almost was tempting to stay in the audience. It was extremely interesting, Astrid. I was listening very carefully.
Good. How are you? How has
Excellent.
Your year been? So for the ones who don't know you, you're also called a transaction diva on your social media. And our expert in M&A transactions. We had a really great podcast with you earlier this year. I hope people should listen to that one, giving very valuable tips also what to consider in anticipating such transactions. But tell us more about your highlights.
Well, I have to tell you that this year was really good for me. Comparing to the 2020, where basically one of the businesses I was running went down. So this is like really uncomparably better. But joke aside, with all the pandemics and everything, it required a lot of creativity in reinventing the way how we work. I think that this was a challenge for everyone. This year was very interesting in a sense that the first half was literally marked with the flood of specs, and we have been involved in 3 of them, mostly deep tech and media. One, I mean, it was media tech as well. So that is still going, because the spec negotiations are not that fast. So this is something which, but we have seen slow down in demand and scouting for the new acquisitions in the second half of the year, because it was a challenge also with financials. It was a challenge with the pipe money that usually goes in with the spec. But nevertheless, a huge amount of money went into basically spilled over into the sectors, including the crypto sector. So later on, we've done a couple of transactions, some of them even with VCs and private equities, and this is a regular business. But we've seen recently the growth of interest in cryptos. And I would say that the crypto market was incredibly strong in M&A sector, in M&A segment. There were around almost 600 deals. But can you imagine? It's really happening. Consolidation market is happening. Still, most of them are happening in the US, not so many in Europe. Not so many in the other parts of the world. There are, but not so many. Some of these deals were might be even distorted in the numbers, because some people could consider Robinhood attractive because of their crypto investment. So that is not what I'm basically looking at. We're still seeing very sluggish M&A activities in smaller tickets, in equity swaps and merging of the smaller startups, let's say scale-ups. So basically, companies are obviously still targeted by bigger players who want to get into the space. And what is the attraction? Because more mature companies and businesses, they simply want to get into that space, and not only get the market, but also get the expertise the company has. So there is a lot of attraction in the space. I personally remain very bullish on usage of blockchain in the different industries, and Astrid knows that I'm really keen on that. So yeah, I would say that is something happening. Data is always hot and always attractive. So we will be seeing some additional movements in the space. Let's say data-driven asset management, that is happening more and more. And I just had some secret talks this morning with someone, so maybe some new deals are coming first quarter next year, exactly in that space. So there is a lot of happening. And I would say that despite of all the pandemics, reinventing the way how we work, and unfortunately, some of the businesses going down, some of the other businesses are thriving. And many of them are not driven by immediate events, but obviously the way how we live now set a trend, and the whole investment direction and M&A activity is looking into certain direction. So on my side, as I said, we have been very active to help tech companies. We love also female founders. We love to support them wherever we can, and we did this year. We had, as I say, a couple of future work with AI predictability. That sector is still hot despite of lots of money coming there, and we are seeing interest of newly highly funded companies, which are now more than unicorns, maybe even decatrons, buying a lot of smaller players and consolidating them. So future work will continue to be. We have now in pipeline 2 deals, and we believe that this is going to stay on the horizon for consolidation the whole 2022. So I think, Christian, that I already somehow went into your question, the predictions, and this is not investment advice.
Awesome. No, but I think what you also mentioned around, the M&A in crypto sector, I wonder when it will happen, that you have networks actually merging and how that will actually pan out, and also for the M&A sectors.
That would be amazing. Well, I have been looking at, and I wanted to, share a couple of things, but for me, it's quite interesting to see that the companies like CoinShare are also acquiring other companies. So it's not only like we have the situation like when LibertyX was acquired by Fortune 500 company, which would be like standard deal we are seeing. But we have also things like the deal like when CoinShare basically acquired blockchain equity index from Alan Howard's Elwood, which for me is showing that there is a maturity in the market. And I think that also people should consider that can be extremely attractive way to grow. It is still a challenge technology-wise. I would assume that also not everyone is a fit. But I work with a couple of companies now, and I'm always advising them, go out there, start partnership, see how technology fit, particularly if there is a blockchain angle or AI angle. You really have to see how you can integrate it. And if there is a good fit, I mean, guys, you're growing together. I mean, I'm mentioning all the time BlockBit and Cryptocurrencies. I mean, that for me is such a sweet deal. I mean, great teams, both companies, wonderful technology, works together, and suddenly we have a huge company. And it is showing. I mean, they are ending this year on a really, let's say, with the flying colors.
Oh, I need to say I'm really a huge fan of Florian, so one of the founders of BlockBit.
Me too.
Amazing story that they have been putting together over the years, and great progress, one has to say. But did you have any favorite deals or anything that really excited you a lot this year? Was it like, oh, that was really a dream transaction?
Coinbase. That was dream transaction. I mean, seriously, come on. It was huge. They did it with a SPAC because they just said like it was difficult to pinpoint the mathematical side of the markets. So I was so impressed with the valuation. I was like seriously impressed at that growth stage and everything to reach those heights. And that means the team has some serious negotiation power. Yeah, that was really one of the deals. And I like this CoinShare deal that I mentioned because someone buying the index is like super cool, and having a blockchain index interesting to be bought. That is something that wouldn't happen, let's say, in 2020, not easily. So for me, that is showing, I love these transactions that are showing that more is coming. And this is what excites me with these two transactions, for example, that I have mentioned. And as you know, Astrid, I always keep very keen eye on consolidation of blockchain market. And I think it's always a challenge to value IP and to value the outstanding token, depending on particularly utility tokens, etc. And you know that we discussed a lot about how to use velocity in calculating that and all these things, because it is not like, oh, by the way, I have like 2 billion assets listed, so this is how much I'm valued. Well, not really. So this is kind of interesting area, which I believe is going to be very hot in coming years, because there is a lot of potential in it, not anymore only within the underlying technology, but now with actual blockchain economy, which is amazing.
Perfect. So what is your outlook for next year?
Hot. Next year is going to be super hot. I think that we will be looking more deals. I mean, look at the numbers, and I really wanted to share with you guys this. When I look at the numbers, so in 2020, we had approximately 200 deals, for example, in the blockchain space, in so-called crypto-driven M&As, and we had almost 600 in 2021. And we had just a couple of specs in that space. So we can't say this is where the money is coming from. So I personally think that I stay very bullish on blockchain-driven economies M&As, because I think that there will be all the big guys, like recently Deutsche Börse went out shopping. We will be seeing many others. We know Euronext in 2020 went shopping. So I think that there will be a lot of activity because also thanks to the growth of the VC space, there was a lot of inflow into startups and scale-ups who are really working day and night on bringing new technologies and new ideas and conquering the market. That will translate into very hot M&A activity. So I personally predict that 2022 is going to be very hot.
And do you think there will be a particular sector or particular, applications that will really make the race next year?
I still think that financial services are going to lead. Simply, it's such a deep market, and there is a need for transformation. It's a genuine need. I would assume also that we will start seeing very shy, but it will be happening a health tech, because there was also a significant amount of investments in health sector in 2020. So 2022 would be a ripe year for the companies to grow, digest investment, and start considering about consolidating. So this is something which I think it will be happening as well. This is all very early pre-IPO activities. I'm not talking about that is a different game. I also perceive that apart from the fintechs and still health tech, I think that the future of work will continue hot for consolidation, which already started, because there are simply too many players. It's a fragmented market, so it needs to be consolidated, and we do continue working differently. So there is a need for that type of solutions. So that's what would be my top 3 sectors for consolidation. And as I say, this is somewhere like a mid-market, not really pre-IPO or IPO.
Mm-hmm. No, sounds really exciting. I mean, the thing with the healthcare sector is also something that we've seen, and I've also had the feeling recently that even sort of more conservative players in this field are also warming up more to blockchain technology and also to tokens, actually, as also sort of an incentive structure for patients and all other stakeholders in this ecosystem. So I'm also really curious what 2022 will bring and beyond. But thank you very much, Dusica. This was very, very, insightful.
Thank you very much for having me also this year and end of the year. I really appreciate it, and I feel really privileged to be here with you guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you for being part. Have a great 2022, and I hope we will see each other someday in Vienna for a coffee.
Yes, the Christmas is coming. Of course we will.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Perfect. So our next speaker is actually one of our co-hosts today, Matthias, from Riyadh. So tell us a little bit more about your year. How has it been?
Yeah, thank you, Astrid. It has been a quite turbulent year. I have actually in the preparation for this a little bit thought about the details, because all this remote work and this crisis topping each other make also time seem a little bit different than it was back in the past year. So a little bit about me, for those who don't know me. My name is Matthias Tarasiewicz, or Tarasiewicz, however you want to pronounce it. I'm a tech entrepreneur, I'm a research-driven venture builder, and I'm also the director of the Riot Institute. So by trade, I'm a developer and consultant, and I'm working since quite some years to make crypto and blockchain also a little bit more graspable, tangible, and understandable. In this regard, we started the Riot Institute, which is an NGO, a foundation, mainly based in Austria, Vienna, but also now, and specifically this year, also expanding globally massively. So we started initially in 2012, and this whole thing came into being in 2015 as a spin-off of the University of Applied Arts. So we have been in the industrial design domain, but also in the artistic research domain. And we're growing into something more also research and developer focused. We are still active in a lot of different programs we are organizing by ourselves, mainly built around training and education for technologists and researchers. but also in the context of industrial research and also post-industrial research and development. So in this context, I've also founded already 2 companies in this regard. On the one hand, the Dropout Tables company together with my colleague Ralph Pichler in Vienna, which is focused around blockchain development and in particular trying to also grasp the deep challenges we see in the blockchain space. So there's a lot of nice ideas and nice projects, but usually a lot of these projects are not so well grounded technologically. So there's even some developers are going so far that there's a lot of I would say bad sentiment or still very negative sentiment towards the blockchain space in general. This is very obvious and very strange to us sometimes even, but it's getting better as also the code maturity matures, and also as the concepts seem to mature overall. This is something that I have perceived positively this year. So we have another hype cycle of blockchain that came along. Of course, always driven by price, but also, as we have seen last year, strongly driven also by external factors, and especially also by COVID, because we saw a big price drop of Bitcoin once the crisis was happening. So back in 2020 and in 2021, we've seen a few bull cycles already. Now it's a little bit of a weaker market in general. But what I wanted to point at more specifically is the project and the project quality, which only partially and partly has been rising. There's a few new concepts on the horizon which I find particularly interesting. So there's a lot of different concepts that emerged in the Web3 domain. For example, most notably around data, concepts and markets around data, maybe driven by GDPR and by a lot of consumer demand for more data privacy. Also, one thing that was very notable in the year was the digitization was again progressing faster than expected. This is actually, in my opinion, due to the fact that a lot of people are sitting at home and have to remote work, and a lot of decentralized teams are forming. So people are getting used to this work and to actually also talk with their colleagues and interact with their colleagues the whole day via the computer. So I see a lot of things and opportunities there as well emerging. And sadly, we see also that there's a downside to that. So we have seen one of the largest breaches in security and in general in malware in this year. So this was very evident, also especially for security researchers. Just recently, in the past weeks, there has been the Log4j security hole, which even affects any device running a Java logger, a critical infrastructure, so to say, a library. So there has been a lot of debate, especially in the researcher community, about how to mitigate these risks, because most of these attacks have been attacks that have been that would be executable because it is a classic economic attack. Because if you look closer, who are the people who are maintaining and working on this open source software stacks? Usually they are still considered to be in the Web 2 domain. So people are doing this voluntarily, which means they're not getting paid for it. And there I see a lot of interesting aspects or in a way a hook where the whole Web 3 world can position itself, because there is the proper incentive mechanisms, this is the theory in place, so that these kind of basic attacks wouldn't happen anymore. Of course, this has been also in the spotlight for a lot of security researchers in order to understand how to secure any software that is building on a lot of other packages and libraries from the open source space. So I still believe that we will see an increase in malware and an increase in all these different zero-day attacks that are happening across the sector, because essentially there is something at stake now. So also due to the fact that a lot of people are hosting their crypto, keeping their crypto on their machines, and the digital assets are on the rise, on the example of NFTs and so on. there's a lot to get actually once you get access to the proper channels. So I think once there's an incentive in place, there will be also attackers that look into that. So we have seen also a lot of interest not only from companies but also from investment that goes into the security and anti-malware domain. So this I thought is also important for us to maybe a little bit debate today, because especially since a lot of data that we're putting and storing online, most notably our identity and personal data, has been a strong target as well this year. So this is also provable the case by looking at identity thefts that just happened in 2021. So this spiked by the factor of at least 20. And I guess since I'm tackling a lot of questions and a lot of aspects here, I also thought about, and I started already taking notes to make this available at a later stage, that we can actually offer this to our public here and to the people listening in, because I think it's important to understand that technology and the digitization is on the rise, but also the threats are increasing.
But how can we protect ourselves? Well, how can we increase awareness? Because like you and I, we're in the tech scene all the time, so we're quite aware about things like also social engineering and all these kind of things. But where do you see, how could we improve that in general public also?
Yeah, I guess formats just like this, like the year in review is only the start of where to thematize these things. I think we should speak about them much more openly. I think still we're trying to be a very digitized society, but at the same time, there's not only the financial literacy, which is important, but also still the digital divide in place. So a lot of people are using technologies they're not really fully understanding at the moment. So my approach and the researchers' approach that I'm working with mostly is by trying to find and change their way of interacting with technology by looking at utilizing a lot of tools and technologies which are open source, so which you can actually verify that they are not doing anything wrong. At the same time, this introduces, of course, risks, but you can at least, if you're well knowledgeable enough in the individual topics, you can take a look yourself, or you can ask other people. And usually, this is a bit of a rabbit hole, but people are already using Linux on the desktop and using open source technologies on the desktop. Although I see specifically with Apple's approach to counter a lot of like open aspects, a bit of a backward step in this regard. I think one approach would be to a little bit research before utilizing specific technologies or specific tools. So there's a lot, of course, money being made with data and analytics and like structured data. So also looking at the platforms we are transmitting here towards. So Zoom is also like, of course, yeah, you have to a little bit look at the different practices of the companies and ask yourself like where and how are they making money. So I guess like the whole data market and selling and buying of personal data has been regulated very closely in the European Union now, but globally it's still a huge business. It still will be a super huge business. And so I guess like one has to ask himself that. So anything that is free or any service that you use that is free, you have to ask yourself why is this possible, or how can it be possible that these services are free? So you're usually paying with your data, and I guess like this is like something that will also enter the mass perception soon. I mean, it largely did as well. And what is more important, in my opinion, or more of a bigger threat, are services which are not so obvious that they are utilizing poor security standards. So one example has been, for example, Telegram, which of course a lot of crypto people and crypto natives are using traditionally. So this has been criticized in the past, not only because a lot of like extreme groups and extreme opinion leaders have been utilizing it. So anti-vaxxers, but also like far right-wing people as well as crypto people love that platform. At the same time, if you look closer at the technical capabilities of it, most of the content is stored unencrypted at centralized servers.
Matthias, can we hold that for a little bit?
Yes.
it changes my picture because I remember that Telegram was announced to be more reliable, more secure than WhatsApp to many people, and it's different. From what I understood from you, it's not that secure.
Yeah, so I mean, the problem is, I see the public perception debate about these messengers and communication systems a bit. Yeah, it's a bit on the surface, because there has been recently also a few leaks that show us. There was an FBI leak. For those who have researched this, I can maybe link this also somewhere that people can find it. It was in the media everywhere. Where there has been extensive research on what kind of data is extractable from third parties. So either from the state or from like an external third party listening into this kind of device. What can you get? And Signal, for example, Signal Messenger was by far the hardest to crack, because there's like different aspects to look into when you look into the security of such systems. On the one hand, all of them and most of them have complete metadata leakage, so you can see who you contacted with at what time, but it's not very tangible and visible what kind of like the content itself is not visible. But at the same time, this might be sometimes for journalists or other people like too much already to reveal that they have been talking to a source, for example. So at the same time, I don't see WhatsApp as being. I don't understand why this is even discussed, because WhatsApp and most of these communication systems are not easy to look at. So you understand actually the protocol, how it works, and this might be secure. So this is only really securing you against transport security. But as soon as this is on your device, there's like additional things that have been also by law enforceable. Like, for example, there was this huge debate also looking back at the year from NSO Group and the availability of like surveillance mechanisms such as the Staatstrojan or the State Trojan, which is now installed also a lot and has been even affected a few people from the US Congress. So
I think these days the debate about which messaging services should be used is mostly driven by billionaire entrepreneurs. I remember a tweet from Elon Musk where he recommended to use either Telegram or Signal because it's more reliable and more secure than WhatsApp, and this has a cascading effect afterwards.
The interesting thing though to look at, and here again, like as Astrid was mentioning as well, so I think like our research diligence as well as like any tech diligence is something that about the systems and software you use should be like going beyond the nature of the system and beyond the technical capabilities of this, but also to look at the governance. I guess Astrid, you have been pointing to DAOs as a new method to also govern commons or govern like technological systems, networks, and so on. This is, of course, the case also with messaging systems. So if you look, for example, at Signal, it has a different structure. It's a foundation running it. It has been founded by Moxie Marlinspike, cypherpunk, a very well-known cryptographer. They don't make any money by selling data because it's like an NGO to foster the software development. So I think like also looking at who is running this, what is their interest in this particular software piece or network or whatnot. It's very important to understand like to measure the threat level or to understand if you want to be part of this, or if you want to use it. Of course, from a marketing perspective, it's a problem because usually the masses are using like all sorts of different systems and all sorts of like unsecure communication channels. So I guess a lot of people, researchers, people that really work in fields which are crucial or where it's crucial to be like secured or at least not observed, are utilizing segmentation of the devices. So you use like one device which is secure. So there has been also a few interesting startups that I've seen that started developing products in the hardware domain this year, which have been centered around privacy. So this is still in the public perception, also a strong topic, although there's always this saying that convenience always beats security. And I guess this is still very much the case. So we are using very unsecured services. We are making ourselves vulnerable. And I guess one aspect could be that Web3 systems and properly governed systems can actually be a solution for that. Although I've not seen a lot of things happen in this regard. There was a lot of things announced, but I'm looking at the code maturity actually of the different systems and networks around. There's still a long way to go. So the Web3, I hope will be there in like 10 years from now. So definitely not 2021.
I hope so too. I want to go into cyberspace pretty soon, so they should speed up. Matthias, let's dig deeper into cybersecurity a little bit later, and let's call in our next speaker from Shanghai, China, an old friend of mine, Irénée Robin. Welcome to the show. Irénée was part of a podcast episode in the last year in which we were talking about the situation in China and how China is managing the coronavirus situation. Irénée, welcome.
Coming through. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you and I can see you very well. It's good to have you back. How is it going in Shanghai?
Let me go through. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Irénée Robin. I'm based in Shanghai, China, as Christian said, where I've been living for more than 21 years. I am what the British call a pharmaceutical physician. That is to say, neither a pharmacist nor a physician, but a specialist of drug development. My background is in medical R&D, particularly virology. I worked for many years in a large Chinese CRO, and now my activity is, simply put, to assist Western innovators in human health to develop their footprint on the Chinese market. So first of all, I would like to thank my good friend Christian for inviting me to contribute to his famous Year in Review podcast series. Christian, I really hope that I will be able to invite you to China again, sooner rather than later, depending on travel restrictions.
I hope so too. It would be great to go to China again. But what is your expectation towards travel restrictions?
Oh, well, expectations for travel restrictions is somewhere between summer and end of the year. But that
but you're not talking about 2021. You're talking about 2022.
So yeah, nothing in a scoop for you. It will not be released before the end of 2021.
Okay. That's a long way to go. We had a nice conversation last year about how the drug development and the vaccine development will evolve. And we made some predictions. And the first question I have to you and I'm interested in is, how did the reality turn out to be, in your opinion?
That's exactly right. So I will speak to you again about COVID-19. So I'm sorry about that, but don't worry. I will take you on a lesser traveled road, and you may not already know what I'm going to tell you, the story of COVID-19 therapies. And to be more specific, actually, the story of the COVID oral pills. It's an interesting story, although at some point it's a bit of an upsetting one, especially in light of the current status of the pandemic. I'm certain that every one of us, we all sense somehow has been missing in the global fight against this virus. So here's what I mean by that. Pandemic response to me is like a chair. And a chair must have at least 3 legs for you to safely sit down on it. The 3 legs of a pandemic response can be described by 3 verbs: to treat, to heal, to prevent. To treat, to heal, to prevent. So today we will leave the prevention leg aside. I mean, multiple vaccines exist, and there is absolutely no doubt that they are playing their role in the fight against COVID-19. And we will only focus on the treat and heal legs. Well, since day one of this pandemic, which, as you can imagine, I have experienced firsthand in China from 20th of January 2020, treating their COVID patients as effectively as possible is the number one concern of physicians worldwide. It's also their responsibility. Always provide each patient with the best treatment available to them. Treating is the job of clinicians, and it's akin to an obligation of means rather than results. That is why, during the first month of this viral outbreak, doctors worldwide have been scrambling inside their existing toolbox. And by that, I mean existing drugs, symptom relief procedures, and the like. From day one, infectious disease clinicians have tried various molecules, various protocols based on pre-COVID literature at first, and starting with compounds that had demonstrated activity against SARS-CoV-1, the SARS agent, from the 2003 emergence. This is how, for instance, hydroxychloroquine, HCQ, emerged, for instance. In France, which is my home country, HCQ was championed by a physician and virologist from Marseille, one with an impeccable research pedigree, Professor Didier Raoult. He, however, made what I personally think is a serious communication mistake by saying on French TV as early as February 2020, the game is over. Quite the mishap, you will agree, yeah? But I'm utterly convinced he was right to try and treat patients the way he did, in the absence of any other option. And this event, believe it or not, had huge consequences. In France, but also elsewhere in Europe, throughout the year 2020, leaders were quite prompt to disqualify the opinion of first-line practitioners as to how to treat COVID patients in the absence of vaccines or specific therapies. Therefore, particularly in countries where GPs, that's general practitioners, are the first point of contact between patients and the healthcare system, GPs were practically denied their usual role. GPs could not treat. And from what I've heard during multiple discussions with some of them, generated a fair amount of frustration. Where in parallel, the research community would not let go without a fight. Simply put, virologists quickly started what shall be done in any and all infectious pathogen outbreak situations. Screening molecule libraries, thousands of compounds to select possible candidates or hits for repurposing against SARS-CoV-2 after demonstrated antiviral activity. One, to me, shall not look down on drug repurposing. After all, the drug that saves the most lives today in the world does so thanks to a very successful repurposing in the 1970s, from high-dose painkiller to low-dose anticoagulant. You probably know which drug I'm referring to, it's a German one. Several hits emerged after this in vitro screening phase. Ivermectin, fluvoxamine, budesonide, Arbidol, in France, Clofoctol, and others. All drugs, cheap drugs, known drugs, especially in terms of side effects and contraindications. Those drugs bore the promise of providing GPs with tools to treat COVID-19 patients. Imperfect tools, but tools nonetheless. After all, sometimes you can use a small standard screwdriver on a cruciform screw, even if it's not ideal. None of them, as you noticed, made it through to mainstream acceptance. Although interestingly enough, HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, and Arbidol are still recommended in the official Chinese treatment guidelines on the COVID-19. However, given that there are over 16 million compounds available for screening worldwide, according to the industry, my opinion is that too little effort was made worldwide in this respect, both in 2020 and in 2021. I shall explain this in detail in a dedicated podcast, but to you, I can give already my conclusion. If the right efforts had been made, then by now, GPs would have in their toolbox a safe and effective combination of ultra-cheap, well-known drugs, easy to administer from the very first symptom, and treating COVID-19. That is contributing to a certain extent to the reduction of deaths, hospitalizations, and long-term sequelae. This leg of our chair, the treating leg, was never properly affixed. That, to me, is the upsetting part of today's story. But now to good news. What do we have today, 17th of December, 2021? What we have now, or almost have, are the first two molecules intended to heal COVID-19 patients from first symptom onset via home treatment. That is, drugs that were designed to fight SARS-CoV-2, not drugs that happened by chance to be active against SARS-CoV-2. Healing, well, it carries more of an obligation of results, especially in the acute infectious diseases field. And healing is, at least to me, first and foremost, pharma and biotech companies' jobs, providing the right tool to clinicians. Well, those two molecules, you may have heard of them. One is molnupiravir, marketed by Merck under the brand Lagevrio. The other one will soon be marketed by Pfizer under the brand Paxlovid. Well, first of all, let me say that being able to go from SARS-CoV-2 outbreak to market authorization of SARS-CoV-2 specific oral antiviral drugs in merely 2 years, it's an incredible feat. I studied extensively the discovery and development of influenza-specific drugs such as Tamiflu in the 90s, and it took 6 to 8 years back then. Well, while discovery of Lagevrio took place indeed in a small biotech company, Ridgeback, its ultra-fast development into a marketed product was only made possible thanks to Big Pharma, Merck in that case. And the clinical program of that drug in particular was conducted at a pace that had not been seen before. It is equally remarkable for Paxlovid, which is 100% Pfizer throughout discovery and development. Well, it is my opinion and that of many renowned scientists around the world that those two drugs are essential game changers in our fight against COVID-19. So let's get a bit into details. Those two drugs, in fact, have different features, different benefits, different risks, mostly because they target different phases of the viral infection cycle. Lagevrio, the Merck one, which is officially authorized in the UK and Vietnam already, and has received a favorable expert panel vote in the US, I like to compare it to a Land Rover. Not the fastest, not for everyone, but very robust on all terrains. In medical terms, what does that mean? Based on clinical trials, and provided, of course, that you take this medicine timely, well, first, you very likely will not die. I listened to Merck's FDA presentation live on November 30th. Nobody died from COVID in the treatment group of the phase 3 of that drug. Second, you have around 30% less chances to go to the hospital. I have read many articles that say that a 30% reduction in hospitalization risk is disappointing. With that, I disagree. 30% less inpatient flow is a very welcome help to ensure a smooth functioning of ICU wards in Western countries. As long as what we call the R value, that is to say the speed of transmission of the virus, remains under control, barrier gestures and so on. Third, you can take that drug no matter what other medicines you take. It has no known drug-drug interactions. Fourth, due to its mechanism of action, it is very, very unlikely to generate what we call antiviral resistance, that is, new virus variants that would escape the drug and render it useless. Something like this happened to Tamiflu to a certain extent in the 2000s. Risk-wise, it is contraindicated for pregnant women due to risks for the fetus development. Well, given the mean age of COVID-19 patients, it's not a strong barrier. Paxlovid, the Pfizer drug, still comparing with a car, is more like a Ferrari, super fast, super handling, but a little bit high maintenance. Performance is much higher than Lagevrio, 80% drop in hospitalization. So, well, you don't die either. Anyway. But pending real-life data, this is very, very impressive. And due to its formulation, however, it interferes with many other medicines, which may be an issue for certain COVID patients suffering from pre-existing conditions. Besides, there might be future variants that manage to evade its mechanism of action. That is why, notwithstanding future efforts in Japan and in China even, I believe that the future of COVID response lies in the combined use of those two drugs worldwide at home, that is before the hospital, and beside not instead of vaccines. Beside vaccines, not instead of vaccines. Always have anti-vaxxers, but anti-druggers, less than that. And combining those two drugs will allow for reduction of each component's dose, less side effects, is likely to warrant higher overall efficiency. It will reduce antiviral resistance risk to virtually zero. It has the potential to turn COVID into not much more than a common cold or a flu. It's a big deal. I said worldwide use. Well, richer countries, they can pay for the drug, no doubt, especially when those drugs reduce hospital costs in such proportions. But for the poorer countries, through partnership with a very interesting organization named MPP, you can look it up if you want, both Merck and Pfizer have already ensured Lagevrio and Paxlovid's affordability via specific licensing agreements that will remain completely royalty-free as long as the pandemic lasts. And the logistics to deliver capsules like this to every corner of the world is so much easier than for biological products such as vaccines or therapeutic antibodies. It makes a lot of sense to quickly move forward on this front. So to conclude, it's a far too short presentation, but there will be a longer one soon. Stay tuned. As of today, except in the UK and Vietnam, our chair has indeed only one leg, the prevent leg. Needless to say, it cannot stand straight. The treat leg in 2020-2021 pains me to say it, but we missed it. It's difficult to assess how many patients we could have saved by giving this treat leg the importance it deserves. But my personal impression is that many deaths could have been avoided via the identification and generalization of the synergistic combination of existing cheap medicines that happen to be active on SARS-CoV-2. All in all, my take is on the treat leg, we didn't do our best. But the heal leg, well, 2021 has clearly been the year during which this leg grew. And given the way it grew, this is great news for the richer and poorer countries alike. So what do we need now? We need flawless logistics, well-informed GPs, and the certainty for people that those two drugs are available at the pharmacy or the dispensary nearby. Sounds simple enough, but it actually is not. So let us make a wish today, and we'll finish on this, that leaders of all nations, with the continuous support of the pharmaceutical industry and the research community, will quickly build in 2022 a chair that they can stably sit on, so that we can sit back, relax too, including in places like a stadium, a restaurant, a club, a bar, a long-haul plane, smiling at one another and seeing other people smile back to us. So thank you very much for your attention. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Irénée, thank you very much for participating. And I'm always impressed by how well prepared you are and how well you're doing your research and deliver accurate content. It's really rare these days when you look on the internet. There is so much chatter. And I completely agree to what you said. We should have another podcast episode in which we go into more detail for people who are interested. Let's pull Astrid and Matthias in the discussion for the next 10 to 12 minutes. You mentioned, Irénée, supply chain issues and logistics. And I saw that pretty much the whole world was focused on doing logistics for SARS-CoV-2 treatments. But what's with the other areas, Astrid and Matthias? What do you think? How is the supply chain going currently?
You want to start, Astrid, or can I? Because I've prepared a lot of
you go ahead,
things in this regard. So I see, of course, from my context, a lot of still supply chain issues that are just emerging in times of crisis and in times of the longer crisis, the multiple crises we are experiencing. So on the one hand, I see the emergence of the secondary markets, especially in research, in IoT and in hardware, where people are in a way hamstering a lot of equipment and partial materials that are needed for the production of hardware. We see a lot of moves also in terms of how the global chip production has been affected by this. So there has been a lot of debate also in creating smaller, not so high density wafer systems. Even in Europe, there's been a lot of debate for Intel also where the next fab will be located. And so I guess supply chain is heavily affected by the crisis. mainly because of an initial disruption, but also because of other elements, and because of people buying a lot of larger corporates also buying a lot of material off the market, especially in the technology sectors, in order to be prepared and not to have any disruption in the future. But where I see even stronger demand at the moment, if we call it more of a resource crisis overall, maybe it's getting more comprehensible then, because we see interestingly also the job and the talent market being disrupted massively. So from my perspective, we had to also massively react to that, because there's a very strong talent shortage or increase in demand of developers, which is evident in the past month. And a lot of companies and research projects, but also larger groups of people have been aligning themselves by starting to train people themselves, because it's very scarce, and prices for senior developers have been reaching astronomical heights. It's really insane. If you look at some of the job offerings in the IT domain, they have doubled or tripled. It's really very insane in my opinion. And at the same time, we are experiencing in this whole sector this kind of anti-junior sentiment. So the training and the scouting and the individual monitoring of the sector has been also changing massively. So a lot of people have been especially juniors were unable to find a job, while seniors have been being offered 2 times or 3 times the pay in the IT sector. So this might also be in the industrial research sector, almost the same. I don't know so much about that, but I guess in the IT, it's visible that this is a strong divide between the upcoming talent and the existing talent. And I think this could have a longer effect on the economy as well. At least in the emerging tech sector, this is a topic that has been discussed. So there was also a recent survey from Gartner in September that has revealed that talent shortage is the biggest barrier to emerging technologies adoption. I guess this is I don't know if this is maybe also comparing to the medical research sector, maybe because a lot of research is maybe focused around COVID, or it's of course, because it's a pressing issue, but maybe there's also money to be made. I would love to hear your input also on this. Maybe if you can, if you see this is the case, or is it something you can comment on, Irénée?
Well, right now, the pandemic fight is it's a mix between public health, global politics, local politics, and so on. It's rather complicated to sort out. But when it comes to logistics strictly, what we have right now in our toolbox is either vaccines or drugs that are injectable, which means they need special handling. We're talking about, a cold chain. We're talking about dilution. We're talking about the intervention at all stages of dedicated personnel. Something quite different from, oral drugs, such like pills that could be shipped, in big containers or big boxes and so on and so forth. And my overall impression is that one of the reasons why logistics in terms of the pandemic was not handled entirely properly is that because we took some, let's say, public health routes that were difficult to follow. If basing everything on a biological drug response or biological product response, be they vaccines or drugs, brings complication. There's nothing easier to ship than capsules, tablets, or the likes. So hopefully at some point there will be progress done on the supply on that end, and then there will be, in terms of logistics, a lot of things that can be done more easily, especially if we want to tackle it worldwide. The West is the West, but especially if we want to tackle it worldwide.
Yeah, I also heard actually from colleagues who are sort of in the healthcare supply chain business that They also say that we had huge shortages on PCR machines, for example, at the beginning of the year. So it was really a struggle to fulfill all the orders. I think also recently sort of a huge issue was also pipette tips, and that they were sort of already offering alternatives as like, oh, now we don't have any plastics anymore. So where do we go with that really? So, absolutely. I mean, there's also really a huge issue, both for research, but also for sort of like all the testing that we have going on these days, right?
Absolutely. So that's why I tend to, as you probably heard from the subtext from my speeches, that I tend to, try and sit back and go back to the simplest possible things. I mean, we know how to make small molecules. Overall, that's the easiest thing to do. And if somebody is tested positive and has symptoms, well, give them the drug, hopefully. And, let's not overthink this. I mean, when Tamiflu came out, governments stockpiled it to a point that it was crazy. And they were right to do it, although there was no pandemic at the end for avian flu, for instance, 2008, 2009. I mean, France stockpiled 94 million pills. I mean, 67 million people, in France. 94 million pills. They stockpiled that much because they were afraid of avian flu. And that was, to me, that was preparedness. And that was not money wasted. Let's try and revert to the simplest ways. Vaccines, in terms of logistics, have their issues, and we've been standing on a prevention leg, and the therapeutic leg, the treatment leg, has been a little bit neglected.
Yeah, this was. So sorry to interrupt. Like another aspect of countering these issues you have been mentioning is also has also been deployed by researchers in order to make medical devices publicly available or open sourcing them. So there has been a trend going on in 2021 that I've been also observing. I've been also posting this here in the chat. I'm not sure if every one of the listeners will be able to see that, but there's for example, open PCR and several approaches. They've been also raising a lot of concerns because the question is if these medical devices should be available to be reproduced by everyone because of the standards they are missing and so on. But I guess it would be at least a step in the right direction by making it also clearer how are these technologies made possible?
Well, that is true. Based on the two drugs I mentioned, just in 10 seconds, the two drugs I mentioned, based on the agreements with the MPP that I mentioned, they can be manufactured for free by everybody in the third world. That's what the agreement states. And as long as it's a pandemic, no royalty to Pfizer and Merck. So everybody can go there. Notable exceptions, Russia and China. Russia and China are not part of those agreements, but that's another story.
I was one final question to you, Irénée. What's your opinion that the therapeutics came last? Why was there such a lag compared to vaccines and other inventions?
I have an opinion, but this is really my 2 cents. It is an opinion. It's not necessarily backed by hard facts. So do you want to hear it?
Sure. Let's go.
Good. It's been there's one hard fact is that vaccine-wise on human coronaviruses, vaccine-wise, China was ahead. Mm-hmm. It was ahead because it suffered from SARS in 2003. That's the only country which suffered from SARS. I know all the scientists who worked on this disease, and the SARS-CoV-1, so the SARS vaccine was virtually ready. So when SARS-CoV-2 came out, they did not start from scratch. They started from a basis. And it was known in the scientific community it was a surprise for no one that the Chinese vaccines would come out in 6 or 9 months. My personal opinion, based on that fact, is that the US, under the leadership at that time, decided to go on a head-to-head with China.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast and make sure you've subscribed. Have a great day.